Hello. Before we enter into the Easter Sunday, I just wanted to make a brief announcement, well, relatively brief, about communion. It is one of the things that I've kind of been agonizing over of how do we do communion during this time of separateness. And I do want to thank everybody who replied to my post on Facebook or sent me private emails or texts. And from all of that, what I have essentially been able to discern is that we're not quite all of one mind on what communion would look like during this time of separateness. And so I think what we are going to try to do is for these Sunday services on YouTube, we are going to continue those without communion for the sake of do no harm. I don't want to sort of jeopardize somebody's sort of faith and their practices by doing kind of a virtual communion in that way. And really when it kind of comes down to it, there's not a whole lot of guidance out there. The Bible, the Book of Concord, both written before electricity even existed, so they are at best sort of general guidance as opposed to anything specific. And when I look across and see sort of what my colleagues are doing, it really runs the full gamut from continuing to abstain from communion all the way to the drive-through or virtual communion. And so it does kind of place us in a difficult position. What is God calling us to do in regards to communion? It is an important part of our faith life. On the other hand, it is not quite at the same level as the Word of God, which I think the Word of God can kind of go anywhere, which allows for virtual worship services, for example. But what to do about communion? And as I've sort of thought about it, as I've read your comments, texts, emails, etc., I think perhaps in this time, God might be calling us to do something new. But because it is new, I want to sort of take it slow. And so what I would like to try to set up, I don't have an official date yet for this because I think it'll take just a little time to get all of that, but about the possibility of doing a worship service, and it would be kind of a weekday service most likely, on Zoom. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, Zoom is really, I think, comes out of the business world. It was established to do sort of online meetings. But the nice thing that Zoom offers that the virtual service on Sunday does not, is that Zoom is sort of a live event. It is also an interactive event. So we essentially can have a worship service with a gathered community. The gathered community can participate by responding at the same appropriate times as we would if we had been gathered in person. And so I think doing it that way, it'll sort of preserve that sense of community. I know there has been a few suggestions about the possibility of kind of pre-blessing the sacraments and then using them either with a virtual service or in a drive-through situation. And in the Lutheran tradition, we really do believe that Holy Communion is an integral part of the worship service. And so to kind of separate out the act of blessing of the sacraments from the worship service really kind of tears the two things apart. And I really feel strongly in keeping those together. And so that is why I would really like to try to do communion through Zoom, where we can keep word and sacrament together as part of the same worship service. And so it's not a separate, private act. It's also a little bit more limited because what I would ask is if you would like to be a part of that worship service with communion, to send me an email. Because the way Zoom works is I will need to send you an invitation. And then there will be a meeting ID number along with the password. And from what we have learned so far in this time, people have kind of been crashing into Zoom meetings that have been made completely public, so I really don't want to do that. And so I would ask that you send me some kind of communication. Email is the easiest because then I can just copy the invitation right into a reply. With the meeting ID and the password, it would also have the time and date and everything else. I think that way we can kind of still preserve the sense of community. We'll have an opportunity to come together and we can kind of maintain sort of the integrity and everything that Holy Communion really stands for within kind of our worship and experience and as Lutherans. I know that will disappoint some of you for Easter Sunday, and I'm sorry. But for the sake of those, for kind of everyone, I just feel better not trying to do something too new just yet. But at the same time, I want to know that I've heard the comments and the request for communion and are addressing them. Thank you.